Howdy. So today what I wanted to talk about is a free alternative to programs like Lightroom or Capture One, which allow for raw photo processing and editing of raw photos. In particular, the one that I'm going to talk about today is an open source software called RawTherapee. And this is what I've been using to edit all of my photos since I started getting into digital photography at the end of last year. So what I wanted to do today is go through, I took a really nice photo of a barred owl this past weekend, and I wanted to go through the process of top to bottom, not like a full overview of the software. I'm no expert, but just what my workflow is like right now and the tools that are offered to my knowledge right now in RawTherapee. There's a lot more than I can really tap into successfully, but what I want to just show is that we don't need to be paying Adobe a monthly fee in order to accomplish whatever our goals are with our photography, unless it's a very specific thing that only that program can do. Usually there's a way around it, and the open source community is very kind, so the ability to do this is for free is incredible. So let's go ahead and get into it. So here we have the interface pulled up, and what we see here when we first open is the file browser, and I have a lot of drives, and this is in a particular folder. So what I'm going to look at here is there's a lot that you can do here. You can star photos, you can mark them for deletion and then delete them. You have plenty of management tools here, along with the ability to inspect the attached JPEG information. So let's say you're looking for a particular photo that's in focus. You can switch over to inspect here. You can batch edit everything at the same time, and you can also do a fast export of a big batch of photos if you see so fit. And of course, metadata filtering. What we're going to do is just look at this photo. So this one here looks kind of gray, and there's a reason for that. Okay. So we have our photo pulled up in the viewer here, and you'll notice that it looks pretty gray, pretty desaturated. And this is going to be the actual direct raw image that we have from inside of our camera. Although it's demosaicked, etc. So, but right now I have no adjustments applied. So this is essentially, on the right here we have all our tools. On the left we have a few other things, all sorts of buttons. But I'll just go through what I typically would use. So we have our picture, and we're starting in the neutral profile, which means it's just using the information from this raw tab here in order to process the raw image or the raw sensor data and to create an image. I've noticed in particular with the GH7 that this is highly desaturated out of the box. Now, the first thing that I like to do is go to my exposure, and we want to take this image that looks pretty gray and get it into something that's a bit of a workable state. So for me, each of these has an attached JPEG. What you can do sort of just straight out is do an auto matched tone curve. And so then this will take the tone curve up to what the attached JPEG has, which you may or may not want. And additionally, I've noticed that the color reproduction here is probably better if you set the saturation to about 50. 100, obviously way too much, but then when we're looking at 0, this image is incredibly desaturated, especially compared to what it looked like to human eyes. So if we want to get back to that point, my go-to is starting around 50, and this is in particular for the Lumix RW2 raw files, at least coming from the GH7. Okay, so a couple of things. I zoom into my owl. I really like this picture here, so I zoom in. You can see we have some color noise going on. We're now zoomed in at 200%, so our detail's there, but our color noise is pretty bad. And this is shot at 1/500th of a second, ISO 2500. It's actually 150 millimeter, but this was just the data that I put in for the stabilization because it was a 70 to 150 zoom lens. And old Canon FD vintage glass. So let's go ahead and look at the noise, what we can do about the noise here. You'll notice that there isn't really too bad of non-color noise. So we have this tab here, second one over, detail, and we have a noise reduction. I find that it's pretty effective for color noise to just turn it on and you see the effect pretty immediately, right? So we can take a before and after, boom, and we're looking at the noise reduction, color noise reduction there. Obviously, we're never going to view the picture from 300%, but we're just looking at it here. If we had non-color noise that was particularly annoying, we can do some work with the luminance and detail recovery sliders here in order to work on the non-color noise. However, in this photo in particular, this doesn't bother me at all, right? I don't want any smoothing. If anything, with this picture, I think I'd prefer some sharpening. And on my wildlife photos, usually I do want to add some sharpening. So here we go. Just turn on the sharpening and it's not too bad. So from a normal sort of view, or maybe even 100%, we can see before and after we get rid of all the color noise, and then we have some minor detail added with the sharpening, but it's not overbearing. Okay, so that's great. Maybe we keep the before and after on. Then, maybe I don't actually want this tone curve. Maybe I want to decide myself. People familiar with the Lightroom workflow can come in and take a take this control cage setting in order to work in an S curve if people are so inclined to do so. So we can start working it in a little differently. In particular, for this photo, I want the owl, my end goal is I want the owl to not be so much haloed in light, but I want the owl to be the brightest part of the image. This is our subject. It's hiding in the trees. We want to be able to see it. Now the auto match tone curve does kind of okay, but as far as getting the punch in the leaves with the nice contrasty detail, to me, this S curve looks okay. And, you know, I think I'll keep it because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sort of local detailing on the owl. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and look at brightening up our subject. We want to turn on selective editing in this tab here, this little box, add, and then here we go. We've got ourselves an ellipse, and the way that these work is they're not particularly detailed like a shape mask, but they have a customizable fall off and radius that we can look at. So let's go to color and light, because what I want to add is I want to add, using the LAB standard, I want to add lightness. And so let's just crank this, right? So we start to see what happens. We crank that. Obviously, this is way too much. I want to preview my delta E. So this is the actual selected area based on this shape, and show additional settings so that I can look at customizing this area here. So for our spot, the centerpiece, we have a spot size, and then we have a transition gradient. So you can see this based on the spot goes in a gradient to the outer edge of this ellipse. And let's just customize it a bit like this. Now the decay, we can change it from a linear decay to a log scale. Typically in this scenario, I think we want linear. And then you can also adjust the symmetry of the decay. So we'll just reset that for now. And then going into the shape detection, we have a range for the actual shape detection. So if I want to just focus on the owl, let's focus on reducing the range, increasing the decay, and then see what we can adjust in order to get more focus here. So because the owl has these white features, and it should be brighter than most of the background, we'll focus on a lightness balance here in order to more focus on the owl. Then take a look at our other sliders. It looks like if we move to a hue, we get less of the background included. So right now you can still see that we're affecting some branches for sure. And we can also play with our spot size just to see what's going on. Maybe somewhere there. And if we get rid of our preview delta E, we see that this is still, horribly bright, but our fall off into the surrounding area is pretty good. So let's just reset this lightness. We have our owl, and now we can start turning it up in order to get just a bit more. I might want my area to be a bit wider so that we do include some of the background area, but not too much. I don't want to ruin the fact that we have this detail here, so let's just make sure that we're playing with this in a way that would, so this would match the auto tone curve. Let's just get it a little bit more, maybe 75. And that way we're able to emphasize this area here. So what I might want in order to put more focus onto the center point is a vignette. So in the exposure tab, we can go to a vignette filter, turn that on, and we start to see this immediate vignetting here. What I like to do is just turn the strength all the way up so we can start to see the shape and play with our other settings. Like I said, I'm no expert, but pretty much you can adjust these settings and kind of play with things in order to see what you want to get to. So I don't necessarily want the strongest vignette ever, but here we take a look. Our area of the vignette is going to change in this way. We can also adjust the roundedness. So this would be square to the left, and then we start adjusting. And then here it seems perfectly spherical. It's kind of interesting. But the image is not square. So I don't really want that. I want something that is sort of default, stretches out this way. Then what we can do is adjust our strength until we find something that's, good. So 0 is off, or low power. And let's just turn it up to maybe just 1. So we can see our two images here. We're kind of washed out in the background just from using the JPEG information for the tone curve. And here we went with an S curve and then adjusted some local settings around the owl just to brighten up the features because this is our subject. And then we're using the vignette to also further emphasize this central subject. And so that way, even though there is a decent amount of tree leaves in focus, our eye is less likely to merge this owl with the tree, but rather we can see it as we intended. And yes, its camouflage is good. That's why it has it. But what we want is to focus on what we actually took a picture of, right? At least in this particular case, this is my philosophy. I like this image a lot, and we want to focus on that. So let's say we wanted to do some different kind of adjustment. So in our exposure, we can close this, we can close the vignette, and we can go to our lab adjustments. Now, this is an alternative to something that they do in Lightroom, which allows us to just adjust the brightness of the image. This is our contrast slider, and our chromaticity is a different kind of saturation according to, I believe, slightly different math. So this looks pretty natural to me. Something that we can look at is potentially which I had done before. So you can see here we have the image. This is our lightness versus hue. And if we pull out the equalizer, this is just some work that I had done on it previously. So turn it on, turn it off. We see we're kind of just adding a tiny bit of color and contrast to the background is what I'm trying to achieve here. So we're taking these particular green points here and just dropping their lightness. And so this allows you to select a specific color in the spectra and then adjust the light levels here. So that would be this light versus hue curve. And so all I did was just add a little more darkness to some of the background pieces, keep our owl the same way that it was, and yeah, to me, this looks really nice. So this is kind of what I wanted to get to, because for me, this is particularly natural, and it is not, you know, it emphasizes what we're trying to take a picture of, which is the owl, but it is not disconnected from reality in any way. So I think this is what we go with. Like I said, there's plenty of other tools here. So what we ended up using, we used noise reduction, and potentially we can also see the use of the impulse noise reduction, which may or may not add a little something. Who knows? Sometimes it does. On my Sony camera, this is sometimes necessary because it's a bit older. So yeah, I like this. Haze removal is nice if you're shooting a hazy lens or through hazy glass. It works very well. And you can adjust your white balance, various other things. Yeah, this tool is incredibly complex, but right now we're just focused on doing something quick, easy, and getting a nice result. And so let's, this image is pretty close. So if I just copy this color profile over and I come to this one, you can see that this is what would sort of come out with the auto match, etc., saturation to 50. Let's just go ahead and paste our profile. Boom. And we get a nice difference there. So we edited one of these photos and we can fine tune, tweak each one, whatever we like, but we got to a place that I'm pretty happy with. And like I said, this tool is completely free. It kind of has everything that you might need at a basic level. And then if you need Photoshop type tools, you can of course always use GIMP. And yeah, I think this is a really great alternative. Saves a lot of money. They have usually very up-to-date raw processing for new cameras. So with the GH7, the RW2 file type was able to be read right out of the gate, even though I was having issues with another software that I was using. I can't remember which one. But yeah, this is really nice. So usually you can come up here, put the Q, or here, put current image to processing queue, Control B. You can also save the profile and save the image. So if I just put it to queue here, we queue it up. We go to the left side tab, go to the queue, and then this is our export. So say I want to export JPEG. best quality compression. I don't really like to save the processing parameters of the image. It's kind of unnecessary for me. And then I just have a folder that we go to here, queue it up, and then our CPU usage will go up a little bit as the photo gets processed. So yeah, that is kind of what I wanted to show, is just that there is a free alternative to something like Lightroom where you can do your basic raw processing. You can also do your really large adjustments or detailed adjustments. This is kind of scratching the surface of the selective editing tool. It's obviously different than using, magic auto masks and AI tools, etc. But for a pretty, low cost of entry, no cost of entry, just your computer that you probably have if you're a digital photographer anyway, I think that this is fantastic, and it serves me very well, especially with the denoising, just the ability to get such a great result without having to pay for some sort of AI denoising tool or using any other tool. Now, of course, if you have the other software already, that's great. But for anyone that's looking to get into this kind of thing and looking to edit their photos, shooting in RAW or not, I think this is a great way to be doing these kinds of adjustments. And yeah, the depth of the tool is very vast. So read the instructions, but this is just kind of a quick overview of how I would do workflow and what I would do on this particular photo. So I hope that that was both informative and maybe hopeful, that we don't need to be spending a lot of money on software subscriptions especially. And yeah, just thanks for watching, and I hope that you have a nice day. We'll see what I feel like making next time.